Hi, and welcome back to Old Fashioned Graces. Today for Frugal Friday, we are talking about lard. Excuse the ripped packaging on this one. So these are basically what you're going to find lard in, and we'll talk about why it is such a frugal option, why I love it and use it every day. Now, if you are at all involved in the homesteading world, I am sure you have heard about lard and its many uses, but if you don't raise pigs yourself, you may think that it's like not really a thing, but I have found this great one. Kind of got my kids kind of scratched up the packaging on it, but it is a great product. I have not actually used this. This is my backup lard in case I run out of our own, but my mom has used this brand. She said it works great. Just as good as their lard. And it's about, I think, 2.5 pounds. It's 42 ounces. So that's like 2 3/4 pounds. And around $7-ish a tub. Which, if you've seen the price of butter, last time I priced out in our area, it was like $3.89 for a pound, which makes this a lot cheaper. And just really convenient. Shelf stable. Use it like margin. So yeah, that's really, really great. We raise our own pigs and we process our own lard. And so our lard usually looks like this, or it's in a quart. This is in a pint. I label it what type it is. This is leaf lard from this January when we did pigs. The leaf lard is a little bit better for baking, but to be perfectly honest, I use both for both. So if you're not aware, lard is rendered pig fat. When rendered properly, it is shelf stable. So if you're rendering it yourself, you can can it like this. This is canned. I store it down in my pantry, down in my basement. I've used it 2 years old. Works great. No issues. Occasionally I'll have some that don't seal properly and then you'll have issues, but this works great. You can also buy it in the prepackaged, like I showed you the canister, and it works just as well. You can freeze it if you're rendering it yourself. You have lots of different options. But why use lard? So we try to avoid seed oils in our family. Fanatical about it, but we definitely try to avoid it. Although one of these years I want to grow and press our own sunflower seed oil, because my issue with seed oils is less the oil itself and more how it's processed. And obviously if I'm cold pressing it, sunflowers I grew myself, I feel confident eating that personally. But it's up to everyone's preference. The wonderful thing about like home raised lard, if you're raising your pigs outside, is we have outside pens. So they have some shade, but they are basically outside they're outside 24/7. They do have some shade to get away from the sun. There's a lot of vitamin D in that lard. Which is great because I live in northern Michigan and I am chronically low on vitamin D. So getting as much of it in through my diet is great. So we use animal fat for cooking. Essentially everything. We use olive oil for a couple baking recipes and for like salad dressings. But otherwise we use butter or lard. Butter is really expensive, especially if you're wanting to get the good stuff. And now that we have cows, we make almost all of our own butter. It's probably been 6 months since I've had to buy butter. But when you have your own cows and you're realizing how much milk it takes to make a pound of butter, it's kind of crazy. It is so much milk. So you really see how valuable that butter is and kind of treasure it. So we try to use lard for as many baking and cooking things as we can, and only use butter where we really want that butter flavor. So like I said, it is a lot cheaper even if you're buying it, at least in our area, to buy the lard versus butter. It has a lot of vitamin D in it. And if you're raising your own pigs, it is a byproduct. We consider it's one of the reasons why we raise pigs and butcher them out is for the lard, but it's also kind of a bonus product because it's not technically the meat. So we trim as much of the fat as possible, and we usually butcher our own pigs. And so we actually take the hides, we skin them, we don't scald and scrape. So we take the hides, we bring them inside, and we scrape the inside of the hides to get as much lard off. We get, I think we figured about 10 to 15 pounds of unrendered lard off of each hide. And then by the time you render it down, it's less because there's a little bits of meat and other fibrous materials that you don't use. I will link below my tutorial on how to process it and render it down yourself. That's how I do it. There's lots of different ways to do it. So just do what works for you. I'm going to tell you some ways that we use it and how we use it instead of butter. And I'll link a bunch of recipes down below that I have. If this is something you want to learn more about, I have contemplated making an ebook about it, a free ebook. If that is something you would find helpful, please comment below and I will see about getting it made. So any pastry type thing, my favorite thing to use is lard. It is way better than butter. It turns out so much better. When it comes to using it in baked goods, it is actually shortening. So we tend to use the word shortening for margarine, but it originally was used for lard because it actually shortens the gluten strands. So when you develop gluten like in a bread, they get long and stretchy, but the lard actually like chemically cuts up the strands so it's not as chewy, which is great for things like biscuits and pie crusts and things of that nature. That being said, you're not going to want to use this in your bread. So you're not going to want to use this in bread. You're going to want to use butter or oil, specifically for that reason that it causes a shortening of the gluten strands. Now, the great thing is if you're making gluten-free stuff, it doesn't matter. There's no gluten to shorten. So my favorite recipes to use it in, I make pasty dough. I make pasties, which if you're not from Northern Michigan and don't know, it is a hand pie that's filled with a savory filling. So usually like meat and potatoes and rutabaga and carrots, that kind of thing. I use it for making biscuits and the most bomb pie crust ever. I also make easy croissant rolls with it, as in like there's not a 15-step process. It's pretty simple. Trying to think what else. We use it for frying like every day if I'm sauteing something. Not so much deep frying because that just seems like a waste of fat, to be perfectly honest, and not the healthiest obviously. But anytime I'm sauteing stuff, we use cast iron, so we put that in there. Anytime I'm greasing a pan, I use lard. Since we use homemade butter for stuff, the homemade butter still has a little of the buttermilk in it. I haven't found a way to get it perfectly out, so it doesn't work terribly well for greasing. Even in things where I use butter as the fat, I still use the lard to grease the pan to prevent it from sticking. We use it like every day because at least once a day I'm sauteing something, if not baking something with it in it. So it has saved us probably, well, let's see. I was using about 2.5 pounds of butter a week between sauteing and baking. And let's say I'm able to replace 2 of those pounds now using lard. So I figure butter is around $4 a pound. Sometimes more, sometimes less. I figure around $4 in my mind. So let's say $8 a week. So, $32 a month. This is the cheap, like Aldi butter. This is not anything fancy. This is cheap. The cheapest butter you can get. That's actually butter. So we're at $32 a month. $320, $380, some, let's say $400 a year I save by using lard instead of butter. That's a lot of savings. Probably more actually, because that was several years ago and we go through a lot more food now. We cook for a lot more people. But yeah, that is one of the best ways that I would recommend to save money on groceries. It's just an easy swap. And the thing is, I love that it's shelf stable. So like when I open this up, I'll have it next to my stove and I just scoop some out to fry. And I don't have to refrigerate it like you have to do butter. It shouldn't go bad. If it does go bad, you do know. And that's usually because like some moisture was in there that you didn't realize when you canned it or whatever. And it'll smell like rancid meat. But otherwise, you're good to go. And I just keep it by the stove and use it. The other thing I love about it is if you're using butter in baked goods like pastries and pie crusts and all that, you have to freeze it or get it really, really cold. With lard, you don't have to do that. You can use it cold, but it's kind of a pain in the butt because measuring it makes it a little bit difficult. Instead, you use it at room temperature. You just spoon it in, and instead of like grating it once you get your measured amount in there, you just pinch it together with your fingers and mix the crumbles, and it's glorious. I love it. It is one of my favorite things ever. So I highly, highly recommend you try the switch. I would love to know if you're rendering it yourself or if you're buying the store-bought. I will put a link below to the one that I recommend and include the links below to recipes using lard. I know some people, when they raise their own pigs, they get to this point of like, great, I have all this lard. Now what do I do with it? And so these will be some ways to help you and just kind of get your wheels going for how to use it. I think I'm going to start incorporating on Frugal Fridays some ways to either be frugal on the homestead or to use the stuff on the homestead in a more frugal way. I will talk to you later. God bless.